to the Business Blueprint Podcast, where we take you on an exciting adventure through our triumphs and challenges and failures in creating and maintaining a thriving 6, 7, and 8-figure business. Get ready to dive into our strategies, decisions, and yes, even valuable lessons we've learned from our missteps. But that's not all. We'll also bring you industry-leading guests who will provide you with their priceless insights and wisdom. Stay tuned because the captivating journey of the Business Blueprint begins right now. Hi, I'm Charles Hatley, and this is the Business Blueprint. Today, we're talking about part 2 of branding. Last week, we were talking about a lot on internal branding because I think that is all of our beliefs that in order to have a strong external brand, you have to have a stronger internal brand. Because if your team is not willing to execute your vision and your brand, your clients will never feel it. So, Dan, I wanted to start with you today. And last week, we talked a lot about communication, and how to be accountable for your failures in communication. How do you make other people on your team accountable for their failures in communication?
Tying back in what Rebecca was saying on one of our prior episodes, it's having that open dialogue with the team, and you have to build a trust. If your team doesn't trust you, they're not going to be open and honest and really tell you what they're feeling. And then they may sometimes feel afraid or scared to be held accountable. I was in a meeting yesterday with a team member, and I was talking to this person. And for me personally, I'd struggle with real direct communication. And it's something that I'm going to try to improve on. And I'll never be perfect, just like I'll never be the best communicator. But for me, conflict is something that I don't enjoy, not that probably many people do. But as a leader, you have to. You have to just accept that there's going to be conflict. And that's one of the things just personally that I'm working on. But you have to also know that if it's affecting your business or the firm, you just have to have those conversations. But as leaders, we want to allow our employees the ability to make decisions on their own and even fail, but as long as they can learn from it. But I had a real direct conversation with an employee, and I just kind of used what Rebecca was saying, and I just say, "No, how are things going?" "Oh, they're fine." "Well, I know they're not fine." So, okay, well, let's talk about that. Here's what I'm seeing, or here's what I'm observing. Is that what you're seeing too? And then why are we getting to here? Kind of leading them down the path so you start developing trust, and they feel a little bit more comfortable so they can start opening up. And by the end of the conversation, it was a wonderful meeting because they acknowledged that there are some things that they're failing on that they need help on. But also throughout this, it was, there was afraid to fail. And as leaders, we just need to continue to repeat, you're going to fail. And that's not a bad thing. I want you to fail. So don't feel that you need to take on everything because you don't want it to fail. And it opened up. And I had other team meetings yesterday too, to where it was just the same approach that we just need to encourage our team members that we're all in this together. And we can learn from one another. You can learn from my failures. I can learn from your failures. And accountability sometimes can be such a bad word that people are afraid of it. It's like, well, I want to be held accountable. And depending upon your employment history, there are employers out there that accountability usually leads to termination. And at our firm, it doesn't. And that's just something that me as a leader, I just need to communicate, because we say it and our employees hear it, but do they really believe it from past experiences? And once they do believe it, it's pretty neat to see these changes that they're wanting to make. And in the past couple of weeks, at least from the teams that I manage, I can tell that they really do believe in our firm, that our accountability is, let's just do what's best for the clients in the firm. If that idea isn't good, great, let's try another one. Why didn't that one work? So we can make sure that we just don't repeat it. And I've just seen our leaders take bigger steps and make decisions instead of feeling a little bit uneasy about making a decision. I had just one of our leaders teams me today saying that they want to make an offer to a position that we interviewed for. Is that okay? And I said, is this someone that you think is a good asset? Yes, great, do it. You don't need my permission. Just thank you for keeping me in the loop. But this is your team. I want you to grow it. You don't need me to make every decision. And if it doesn't work out, okay, well, let's figure that out later. But right now, you're excited. This person is excited. You think it's in the best interest of the team. Great job.
Having those direct conversations is hard. And the problem is, I don't think any of us are good at direct conversations because it's all subjective, right? What is direct for me, it really is not direct for other people. And what is passive for me may be what most people consider direct. I always joke, Rebecca tries to get me to be more direct, and in my assertions. I don't think anybody wants that. But we each are different. And I think, as somebody who strives to be good at communication and strives to be value-based, we put a lot of time and attention into how the receiver of the conversation is going to feel. And sometimes it's a misfire, right? Sometimes it is having that respect and accountability to the team member to say, look, man, this is what's going on. Kind of like our brand externally, right? We promise clients that if anything's going on with your case, anybody's talking about you, I'm going to call you up. I'm going to say, hey, look, judge said this, opposing counsel said that. Here's some emails that were sent. I'm going to tell you every single time that you've been talked about in my world. And that's a hard promise to keep, because sometimes the things that I had to send to clients, they didn't want to read. Right. And I knew they didn't want to read it. I knew it had no value, but I was like, I promised you that I was going to be open with you. And Dan, you brought up another idea that I live by, and that is success through failure, right? If I wake up and I succeed one time per day, I consider it a win. Because usually my success is I got out of bed, and then I've won for the day. The rest is going to be failures stacked on top of each other. So, Rebecca, in branding for a team, how do you market internally to your team that success comes through failure?
Sure. So I think, of course, having that open communication, but I had a conversation with someone in our organization who had messed something up, and we had a one-on-one conversation about it. And at the end of the conversation, they were saying, I'm so worried about what you guys are going to think of me and what, all of these other things. And I said, look, this is right there in our values. It's, there's P and then there's A. It's second on the list is accountability. You came to me and you said, this is what I messed up. This is how I messed it up. And this is how I'm going to make sure that I don't mess it up again. If you came to this conversation and said, I've never done anything wrong in my entire life, and, this is your fault or this is someone else's fault, we would probably have a different conversation. But they had that accountability. It's not an end of the world mistake. It's a bad mistake, but it's something that they're also not going to forget, and they're learning from it, and they're moving forward in a way where it isn't going to happen anymore. So that has to be part of it. And when you're dealing with attorneys, there are going to be mistakes. There are going to be unforeseen results, that happen in cases, but it's always, what can we learn from it? What could we have done better? And what are we going to implement next time to avoid, having some sort of surprise or having some sort of unfavorable result? That's the constant exercise. That's why they call it practicing law, right? You're never perfect at it. You just practice every single day, and hopefully you get better tomorrow.
Well, it should also be called the practice of business, right? Because this is much more a business principle. Is you're allowing people to have autonomy to the point that they can go out and start working for the business. Let me ask you one more question, Rebecca. You talked about this example. How did you know it was time to call this team member?
I didn't. I just thought that someone should have a direct conversation. Sometimes things just come to you. You get information from, a leader of a team says a team member is having an issue, and here's the response, and here's what's going on. And it's all filtered, right? We're all playing telephone with each other. And so at a certain point, it's just, no, let's have a one-on-one conversation. I want to hear directly from you on what you think happened, what went wrong, and how we can support you, how we can, fix it, or we can better support your efforts to fix it, whatever it may be. And that's just by feeling. And I don't really know what the definitive thing is, other than having that feeling like, wait, this is getting filtered through 2 or 3 levels before it gets to me. And I don't ultimately know how this individual is actually feeling, what they're going through, and what they're planning on doing next.
And Dan, in previous episodes, you've talked a lot about skip level meetings, which is somewhat the idea of what Rebecca's talking about, but just a little bit less, more based off feeling and not timing. When do you know, hey, look, this person, yes, they may be a direct report to me 4 levels down. Direct report's not the right term, but they may be on my team like 4 levels down. When do you know it's time to, I need to part everybody aside? I need to have a direct conversation with you.
Well, in current time, it actually came about through exit interviews, because you see a theme when employees are leaving. It's like, hey, wait a second. maybe I just need to dig into this without having the leader feel that they're being punished or that there's corrective action being taken. But it boils down to just communication. I feel like every issue can be resolved by communicating better, right? And so for skip level meetings, I like them because it allows me as a leader, but not having that person be the direct report, to know what's going on, what is maybe the person they're reporting to not seeing because their team member is concerned or even afraid to speak up or approach them, or maybe they just don't feel that their voice is being heard. And so skip level meetings are a wonderful tool because it not only allows me as a leader to kind of know what's going on teams that are, that I try to help support, but also it gives visibility that others can feel that they feel supported by the company or by the firm because someone from a higher level position is taking an active interest in what they're doing and what they have to say. And even in a prior job that I had, it really wasn't a skip level meeting in the sense that I had meetings with others that were underneath me by an org chart, but I did speak with others that may have been in a different position that wasn't necessarily called a leadership position, maybe a receptionist or a position like that, because they always have great ideas. And whenever I would travel to the different offices, I was asked, "How are you? What's going on? Is there anything that we can do better?" And they would just open up, and I would always leave our visit with at least one great idea from someone that may not have been discovered if the right questions were asked. But skip level meetings also just continues to build that trust, but then it allows me to develop their leader and enhance their leadership skills and their communication skills, which only allows them a much larger growth opportunity, but then extends their runway for future opportunities. And if we can all continue to learn from one another, I think that's just a valuable resource.
You're talking about learning from people within the organization. I saw a chart, and I don't remember the exact percentage, but the basic idea was that the person at the top knew the least. And that's kind of what we're talking about is, once stuff gets filtered up to you, and I know the feeling that both y'all are talking about, it gets filtered up to you, and you're like, wait, I'm hearing this person's name too many times. There's too much stuff being said. It's not fitting together. Everybody just scoot over, not mad at anybody, but I just need to go directly to the source, right? And like you and Dan and both you and Rebecca said, was the person appreciated the attention so much, they didn't look at it as a negative. They looked at it as an extreme positive that you reached out and said, hey, I know this is going on. Let's just take 10 minutes to talk about it. And, I had to talk to somebody about a tough conversation not too long ago. And I told them at the end, because they took accountability. I said, look, this conversation was going to go one of two ways. You took accountability, so I'm going to shake your hand and you get to go back to your office, versus not taking accountability would have ended much differently, unfortunately. And, this goes to our, this internal brand promise for our team, listening and being aware goes to external brand promise. We tell our clients, look, a whole bunch of stuff's being said, like on email, and communication is breaking down, and we're kind of just passing in the night. I'm going to pick the phone up and call you. Right. And that is a brand promise that starts internally. And when your team is willing to make that brand promise internally, you can trust that they're going to make that brand promise externally. So when you're talking about, Rebecca, these tough conversations and this feeling, how, besides showing somebody that you're willing to do it, do you start teaching the next level of leaders in your organization?
Well, that's the part we still need to figure out. So some of it, I think, is walking them through and letting them almost kind of shadow in the decision-making process, and letting them hopefully reach the same conclusion, or at least understand why you're making certain decisions. And then, like Dan was talking about, just giving the autonomy. So if something is kind of directly within their wheelhouse, then give them the autonomy to make the decision. And if there's a mistake, then they're going to learn from it. And if it works out, then it works out, right? When it's something small that's recoverable from, then it's all good. And so that's really just it, just gauging that level of, okay, are they ready? Are they ready to take on this autonomy? You sort of give them a little bit of leeway, see how that works out, talk about the outcome, and then hopefully extend more and more and more autonomy to that individual so they can continue to learn and grow and make their own decisions, not necessarily just try to mimic yours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I forget where I saw this. It's not something I made up. You teach, you observe, and then you have to learn. So if you want somebody to actually get good at something, you teach them how to do it. Then you watch them do it, and then you have them teach somebody else how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you get good at it. And Dan, I know when you're thinking about the idea of bringing leaders up in your teams, people are going to progress in different areas at different rates. How do you handle that?
Slow down and really try to figure out who that person is, meaning have open dialogue, make sure that you're in tune as what their job functions are and what is required and where are they progressing. Are they far behind? Are they on pace? Are they excelling to where maybe you can give them more responsibilities, and have open communication as far as how are things going, what are you seeing, and try to really walk them through. I would say for me, I walk through my process on when I want to hire or when it's time to expand into a new office, or how do we get attorneys to bill a little bit more, and basically just get that buy-in and walking through what I'm thinking. But then I ask, what are your thoughts on that? Well, how would you approach that situation? Is there anything that maybe I'm missing? And I really want to hear their thoughts on that. But then I like to think, okay, how would I want to be approached? Because there's been times in my career where I've been led by awful managers, and it just resonates with me. I will never manage someone like that because I didn't appreciate that, and so I try to learn from those situations so I don't replicate that and make someone feel the way that I felt. But then it all again goes back to what we've been talking about: communications. How is someone going to perceive what you're communicating? Because maybe I'm trying to communicate something, but they're receiving it the wrong way. And going back to the accountability, it's not that I want to hold you accountable in a sense from a corrective action or punitive standpoint. It's just tell me what's going on so we can work on this together. Rebecca's approach, I think, is probably just one of the best approaches. Is we're all in this together, essentially. So something happened. Tell me what it was. Why did it happen? And how can we learn from it? Because 9 out of 10, I may have made that same mistake, or I want to learn from it, so I don't do that exact same mistake, so I can help others, so we can prevent it from happening, so we can know, okay, that this was the mistake. This is what led up to it. What can we do backing up that can prevent us from making that same mistake again? It's not just not making it, is what led up to it, because there could be a breakdown in the process or a breakdown in the communication, or there's something that we can improve on it and do better, or just do a radical change. So I always address it from that point too, is okay, this mistake was made, but why do you think it was made? We're all human, so we're going to make mistakes, but I doubt that you intentionally meant to do something that was harmful to a client or to the company. Maybe there's just something you didn't understand. And I always default to the leader, meaning myself. Okay, what did I do wrong? What could I have done to communicate that better so this wouldn't have happened? Because when you really, at least in my experience, I dig into mistakes, 9 out of 10, it's not because the employee just didn't know what they were doing. There was a breakdown in something, as I was mentioning earlier, communication or the process. So I always like to approach it to where we're in this together. What did I do, and how can we both improve on this? But you're spot on, Charles. It's, teach, observe, and learn. And I do that as well. But I like to learn because, oh yeah, I liked how you did that, so I'm going to incorporate that. And you're taking and making it your own. But the learning part is something that's just always ongoing.
It should be. And, one of our internal values, which I struggle with getting across, is being curious, right? Be curious enough to read books. We'll pay for them, right? One of our company things is we'll pay for books. I don't remember what the limit we put on it was, but it's pretty high because I wanted people to go out there and read. And then I started writing down the books that I read so people could say, look, I don't know what to read. Okay, here's a list of things that I'm reading. Go read anything. Go read something, by Homer, a classic, anything that you want to read. Just learn something new. And I struggle putting that in place. But it is also one of our external brand promises that we want to work with our clients to help them learn what the next step is, right? We want to help our clients grow from the point they are within the divorce realm to being post-divorce, to being in a new relationship, or whatever they may choose. Mm-hmm. So all of this stuff flows together in my mind. Rebecca, as we talk about tying this all back together, right? Our internal promise to our team and how it ties to our external promise to our clients. We deal in divorces. Everybody makes a mistake in divorce, and we don't sit here and judge them. Just like internally, everybody makes mistakes. We don't sit here and judge them. how do you combine those two with your team on the inside saying, hey, we don't judge people for the mistakes they make, just like we don't judge our clients for the mistakes they may have?
Sure. So, I mean, having that open conversation, and then once you build that trust one-on-one, it's also going to make its way through the organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that we took the time, that we lived up to our promise, that we, had that one-on-one conversation, and there wasn't some sort of punishment, there wasn't some sort of trick, it wasn't a trap, right? That's going to build the trust with that individual, and then it's just going to spread, right? They're going to see that this is how we operate internally, this is how we treat people within our organization, and how we treat people outside of our organization. We can say it all day long, but you have to practice it in order for folks to start trusting you and believing you. So living by your values and demonstrating your values is what's then going to reinforce them so that they come back around and make their way throughout every team.
Yeah. And, I was reminded, as you were talking, I didn't think I was going to bring this up. I was reminded by a book I read, The First 25 Years, where the guy talked about the start of Lovesac, how he got on the phone, was yelling at people one day. And I was like, he commented on the fact that it wasn't him. He didn't like that he'd have done that. We all make mistakes. Leaders that feel like they have to be Napoleonic and start jumping up and down and yelling at people, just remember you're going to make a mistake. And the grace that you show people on your team will be the same grace that they show you back. The grace that you show your customers will be when they make mistakes, or if they're, let's say they missed the payment by a day, is the same grace they're going to show you back when you make a mistake. So those brand promises start becoming so intertwined that you can't see the difference in them. So Rebecca and Dan, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to talk to us today about branding. Everything came back to one thing: respected communication. So in all branding, it's going to be respect the people that you're selling to and communicate what you do. And from there, if you like what you heard, please like and subscribe to our podcast. We'll join you next week to talk about other things that we're going through. And if you have any questions, please drop us a line, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for tuning in. If you found this insightful and entertaining, be sure to hit subscribe below and join us on social media to get more insight into what we are going through each and every day.